Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. We begin today's program with the recitation of the Holy Quran by Nasr Ahmad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما هذه الحياة الدنيا إلا لهو ولعب وإن الدار الآخرة لهي الحيوان لو كانوا يعلمون. The portion of the Holy Quran which I have just recited is from chapter 29, verse 65. And the life of this world is nothing but a pastime and a sport, and the home of the hereafter, that indeed is life, if they but knew.
Thank you, Jazakallah, very much, Nasr Ahmad, for that recitation. My dear brothers and everyone who's joined this afternoon, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you. We gather here virtually today for a very interesting conversation about faith and basketball. If we reflect on Islamic teachings, we know there is an inextricable link between body and soul. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has said that it's important to look after one's physical health to see the spiritual progress of the soul. In Islam, one's physical body is not a hindrance to one's spiritual progress. In fact, it's an asset. Indeed, whenever the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, saw his own face in a mirror, he used to make a prayer. And that prayer is, "O Lord, make my nature as pleasing as my body." Now, the promised Messiah, al-Islam, the true and ardent devotee of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who founded the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, has said that it should be understood that according to the Quran, the natural state of man is intimately related to his moral and spiritual state. So much so that even his eating and drinking habits affect his moral and spiritual states. That is why the Holy Quran emphasizes physical cleanliness and physical moderation for prayers, inner cleanliness and devotions. The promised Messiah Islam further writes, after careful consideration, one concludes that this is the true philosophy and that physical organs have a great effect on the soul. So far as our eating, drinking, sleeping, and waking are concerned, they are essential physical actions and they affect our spiritual well-being. Our physical figure is manifestly related to our humanity, he says. And he says the relationship of the body and soul is such that you cannot explain it easily, but careful observation shows that the body is the mother of the soul. This is from the Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, page 21. The body and the soul, a deeply complex relationship that is at the heart of the sport of basketball as well. In fact, as it turns out, one of the contemporaries of the promised Messiah, someone who lived around the same time, was Dr. James Naismith. He was the original inventor of the game of basketball. he famously nailed 2 peach baskets in a gym, and he devised the 13 original rules of basketball. By the way, one of them was no running while holding the ball, the modern day rule for traveling. That was one of the original 13 rules that Dr. Naismith put together. And interestingly enough, he did this right around the same time as the first Jalsa Salana in Qadian. He invented the game of basketball December 21st, 1891. And what a lot of people don't know about Dr. Naismith was that he was a deeply religious man. He was a Canadian-American Christian who studied at Montreal's Presbyterian Theological College. And he said he envisioned the game of basketball to, quote, develop the whole person, mind, body, and spirit at the gym. He was a physical education teacher. He wanted actually to create an outlet for Christians to be influenced through positive character development. In fact, we know about the YMCA, of course, all of us are familiar with that. The YMCA was instrumental to have the game of basketball take off like wildfire because of Dr. Naismith and his connection to the YMCA. The original 13 rules of basketball that he put together way back when, he actually distributed all of those in the 1890s to every YMCA gym in the country. And he actually, Dr. Naismith, became the first men's basketball coach at the University of Kansas. And the YMCAs have integrated basketball on their mission trips. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the game is so popular today in China. It's through YMCA missionaries. So today, we are joined by a terrific panel of Ahmadi Muslim athletes who provide unique perspectives on the topic of faith in basketball. And today is just a conversation about so many aspects of this very rich subject. And we are joined today by Abdul Shakoor Ahmad. Affectionately, we refer to Abdul Shakoor Ahmad as Uncle Shakoor. He's from the Dayton Jamaat in Ohio. He accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1979. He played basketball at Wright State University, which was Division II at the time. I believe it's now Division I, 1972 to 1976. So welcome, Uncle Shakoor, to the program. We have Usman Jamil from Maryland, who is presently in Qatar in the Middle East, but he's originally from Maryland. He played college basketball in Vancouver at Langara College, and he was a high school basketball coach. And he coached several players, actually, who later played in college. He has led several Ahmadiyya basketball camps from here in America, Wisconsin and Texas, to abroad in Pakistan, Belize, and Mexico as well. And there's a special documentary that came out recently on basketball in Belize that he was instrumental in putting together. We also have with us our special guest, Mahershala Ali, from here in Los Angeles, where I am, who needs no introduction. We all know Mahershala, but people may not know that he played Division I basketball at St. Mary's College on a scholarship in the 1990s. I think he played 97 games, and he went by Herschel Gilmore in those days. We're very delighted to have Brother Mahershala on today's program. And finally, we are excited to have my co-moderator for today, Abdul Thomas from Florida, who's a great basketball player and coach in his own right. He coached in many contexts. He played and coached in multiple Ahmadiyya basketball camps and tournaments. So present company excluded, we have some serious basketball talent on this call right now. I was the first to be cut in high school basketball, 9th grade, but the coach did admire my love for the game for whatever it's worth. But I'm a basketball fan, as so many of you are here, and I'm going to turn it over to Abdul Thomas. Let's get the conversation started. Abdul.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So I want to give as much time as I possibly can to the panelists to share their wisdom, their guidance, and their experience. So I want to introduce the first question to Uncle Abdul Shakoor Ahmad. So our dear uncle, the first question I have is what is the connection between faith and sports from your perspective and experience?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The connection is the word practice. We practice our faith to strive to become righteous. We practice our sport to learn the skill and to have fun, to play the game. As was stated earlier, this life is a sport and a pastime, but when we understand the connection of practice, then it becomes all-encompassing that you strive to be the best that you can, be good, do good. And for me, playing basketball was all sports, was just having fun. If you wasn't having fun, it was really, I mean, the exercises Dr. Nassif said, we all do. We go out, we run, we do what we do. So when I look at faith, I accepted Islam as was stated in 1979, but I grew up as a Christian in the United States, having to know the Bible, all 66 chapters and books, and to be good and do good. I'm a TK. My mother was a teacher, and my father, he worked hard and took care of me and my sister. So when we look at this thing called sports, and we understand that pleasing Allah is the goal. So we do what we do, and I was blessed to play basketball team-wise, starting in the 5th grade, and started and went all the way through high school. My senior year, we were number 4 in the state. I played for a legendary coach named Paul Walker. We won his 600th game while I was a senior, and then I got a scholarship to go to Wright State University in Dayton, the first African-American, the first player to get a full 4-year grant in aid. So played in 99 games. The 100th game I missed because I got hurt in the 99th game at the NCAA Tournament Division II in Evansville, Indiana. We were on our way to do it. I tore the cartilage and dislocated my big toe the first half. They wrapped me up. I went back out and played the second half. We were tied with 2 minutes to go. I fouled out. We lost by 10. But the career was great. It was a blessing. It was all about faith, belief in God, and thanking Him for giving me the skills and the talent to do the things that I was able to do. So all of you who are desirous of playing basketball or any sport, practice. Same way you're striving to practice to please Allah, give that same effort to develop your skills for whatever sport it is. But basketball is the sport. So inshallah, enjoy, and I appreciate being able to be a part of this program today, Brother Abdul. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I was actually, ironically, prior to my conversion in 2012, I grew up with Abdul Shakoor Ahmad's children. And my best friend growing up, his name is Mahdi, Ibn Mahdi Ahmad. He was quite the athlete himself. So it was passed down, right? It was genetic with them. When we grew up and played in the backyard and, you know, playing baseball and football, we were always told we could never be on the same squad. We always had to be opposite teams because it was just unfair. So we had to balance each other out and square off. So, you know, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. But anyways, going on, building off of what Abdul Shakoor Ahmad just mentioned about practice, Usman, Jamil, the next question I have is, what do you tell someone who misses a practice, right? If we're comparing faith and sports together, what happens when you miss a practice?
Salah, you can hear me? Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Just like Brother Shakoor was saying, I think when it comes to practice and to be great at basketball or to spiritually climb the levels of spirituality, when both of them, the one unison practice has in both is sacrifice. We're just coming off of the month of Ramadan, and it's such a blessing that God forces that sacrifice upon us spiritually. We can't eat, we sleep less, we recite the Quran more, we obviously eat and drink less. So those physical sacrifices that are imposed upon our body give us that spiritual realm to grow. And I think you flip it over to the basketball side. Last night was the Hall of Fame enshrinement. We all know Kobe, the Mamba mentality. He's the epitome example of an athlete that sacrificed just about everything to get where he was skillfully in the game. And also, I think with the game of basketball, it doesn't just stop with the skillful progression, but it's also the mental side of it, right? That mental threshold that you can garner through what Brother Shakoor was saying with practice, and what Brother Amjad was saying too, in terms of the body and the soul being connected. The more you push your body physically, the more you endure, the higher threshold you get mentally to be able to withstand adversity, be it on the basketball court. And then on the flip side, it helps you spiritually too. So the more you can endure, and God has blessed us, and he says in the Quran, right? I have not burdened the soul beyond its capacity. But what is that capacity? We've been given these hands, this muscle, this framework to push ourselves in one way or the other, and be it through having fun, but also be it through progression and getting better at sport. I think, so the beauty of you saying missing a practice is like missing a salat, you know. And then again, there's levels to both games. There's levels to spirituality, there's levels to basketball. What level do you want to attain to? You know, there's some players that are fine with skipping steps, but then that's where you're going to fall. And Islam and Ahmadiyya, it tells us, where do you want to finish off when it comes to heaven and the day of judgment? What level are you trying to attain to? I think with sports and basketball, it goes the same way. And we can talk on and on, but I'm sure you got more.
That's really, really good. Usman, Uncle Shakoor, Abdul, hi. I was thinking, Mahershala, as I'm going to ask you this question, your journey, you know, you've participated in team sports at a high level, individually practicing, the physical burdens that go with that. And in your own reflecting and analogizing, maybe some parallels you draw with your own journey of faith and some of the interconnections between sport and faith. Really love to hear your reflections on that.
Yeah. You know, when I played basketball, I think something that also I think is translated into my current work or just being an actor is that I think I found myself often navigating my own personal fear and anxiety in playing, because sports start out fun. They really do. But then there's a point when it's not fun. Like, not that it's not fun, is that the business, political elements can sort of creep in. And like, people's jobs are on the line, and you know, you might be at a college that someone looks at as a stepping stone. So your relationship to the sport is no longer like, I love basketball. It's kind of like, you know, not that you're necessarily going to lose your scholarship, but like so much of your identity can be wrapped up into how you're in college and what you've been doing since you were 6 years old to get to where you're at a school that you could not afford otherwise, right? So there's all these other things that, at least for me, that begin to get wrapped up into something that I initially just loved, when someone else sort of began to have ownership over how fulfilling that experience was for me, like how much you're going to get to play it and all that, you know? And then winning and losing is not like, oh, you didn't get the trophy. It's kind of like someone got fired, you know? And so as those things began to, the stakes of that began to feel higher. And like the high school I went to was super competitive, and the city I was in and all that. My relationship with the sport, it got very goal oriented, which is very positive too in a certain ways. But I found at a certain point that because I was able to go to college, I didn't feel I was going to the NBA. That wasn't going to be a reality. So my relationship was very complicated with the sport. Like, yes, I felt it felt amazing to have, but no more complicated than 99.9% of other athletes that go to college for a sport, right? Because a percent of a percent go on, you know? But as far as like faith and the sport, and why I mentioned, try to give a little bit of context on what was at least going on for me at that time, was that I think in some ways what can somewhat spoil that, if you can't get control of that, is the anxiety around playing in certain games and in certain moments and things of that nature. And maybe your time is limited. Maybe you're not a star player, you know, all those things. And I found that it was something that made me more prayerful, you know. And I couldn't articulate my faith like I can now, because I converted to Islam, you know, a few years out of probably like 4 years after I finished playing college ball. But at least at that time, it made me very aware that like the energies, the anxieties, the guidance I needed, I felt like I got to a point where there were the limits of my own knowledge. And I feel like sports quickly sort of showed me my limits. And then so you're like, well, how do I, it's practice is a huge part of pushing beyond where you're currently at. But I think understanding the route and getting the help that you need to push beyond where you're at, by the grace of Allah, I feel like perhaps how I was raised in my mom's consciousness specifically, I think my response was to kind of go to the prayer mat, you know, in my own way at that time, to be like, how do I get further along? How do I get better at this? How do I have more peace when I'm playing? How do I bring the fun back? You know, along with the practicing and working on your game and all that. But I think what it's done, and even not to move the conversation at all, but even now, I look back a lot on less about the years leading up to college, but those 4 years in college playing ball. And the reason I look back on that, because I look at my career as, and don't misunderstand me, I look at my career as a disappointment to a degree. Like from what my goals and expectations were going into college. So I look back at, and at that time, I felt very conscious of what I perceived as a certain sort of coaching oppression. But as more of an adult, I really look back on all the things that I could have done to ease the situation for myself, right? And so as an adult, and with acting and some of like the anxiety or fears pop up, or the vulnerability or discomfort in not knowing how to approach the work, the scene, the practice, the craft, I always have to go to like, I don't know how to do this. So please, like, guide me as to how I can get better as in relation to working on this particular craft, you know, which was basketball for a long time. So I did before I could say, hey, I'm Muslim, alhamdulillah, you know. I think it, you know, I think that applies to every walk of life, every profession, every sport, every community team, is like, okay, what are my limits, and what are the things I do well, and not have like ego about it, but like, all right, let me improve. And then the thing, because basketball is humbling too. You can go out and have 30 points, 10 assists, and, you know, whatever, 3 steals, and the next game go 0 for 7 and like, you know, and end up on the bench. And so to wrap it up, I basically feel like, for me, just what the sport brought up for me in general got me to a place where I often, at a certain point, I felt like a little bit stuck, and I found myself leaning as to like, how do I navigate the situation better? How do I improve? How do I find some peace and ease in this? And so I think the struggle around it was all very healthy in my development, you know. And even to, last thing I'll say is, even to take it out of your specific question, I just found myself speaking about looking back, so impacted about the character building opportunities in the sport. from being on the team and to learning how to share and take a back seat and all that. And I don't want to cut anybody off from dipping into that because I'm sure that will pop up. But there has just been so many things that really apply to being in a community in Islam, you know, and not necessarily like everybody. You got to kind of look. There's like a leader and leaders, and you got to kind of know where you fit but do your part to contribute so that we can get the win. You know what I'm saying? And so,
yeah, right.
So we appreciate the response. Abdul, Shakoor, Ahmad, I have a question just to build off of what Mahershala was talking about the identity on the court and also limitations that come with it. What was your identity on the court? What were your limitations and how did you navigate that?
My identity, I was a point guard, leader of the team, captain, one that was expected to get the team united to carry out the coach's goal. My limitations might have been that I was 5'7", and it was looked at, you know, little guys didn't really bring much to the game, but by working hard and understanding what the game was about, getting the ball in the hole, passing, doing what you had to do. So my strength was defense. I'd pick up the other team's point guard at three-quarter court and dog him all the way, making it as difficult as I could for him to carry out what he had to do. So, and that was my contribution to the team. I understood that the shots you had to perfect in basketball is not a three-pointer because they didn't have three-pointers at that time, but it was a layup. Getting from one end to the other and putting the ball in the square. We had a saying, you hit the square is money in the bank. So the bank shot is key. I guess the highest percentage shot in basketball is a layup. So if you understand, we want the highest percentage shot, but you just extend that out. And if you practice hard, you'll find out that anytime the ball hits the square, it's going in the hole. So these are the things that, I guess, having fun for me was knowing that I had worked on my skills, but God had given me the gift. I had extra long arms and big hands. So those were my assets, and just being with the team and understanding that the coach had a job to bring the team together, and I was a part of being on the team. So when I accepted Islam after college, it was the same thing. Allah was the coach, and being on the team was being in the prayer line, shoulder to shoulder, seeking to carry out Allah's goals. So that's what helped me. And that's what helps me now. I'm not on a team playing basketball, but I'm on Team Ahmadiyya, wanting to convey this message that, as Hazur said in his khutbah for Eid, La ilaha illallah. That's the message. And we carry that to others, inviting them to find out what's in the Holy Quran. So that's our team, that's our mission. And I'm working on my limitations each and every day to strive to be a better Muslim, Ahmadi Muslim, having accepted the coming of the Messiah and the Mahdi. And when you do that, it's fun. And if you understand, hard work is what you have to do. The sacrifice that I hear the brothers say is part of being on the team. But as long as you're willing to do what needs to be done, we'll be successful, inshallah.
Mm. Wow, so much. It's just amazing to hear that perspective, Uncle Shakoor, because there's so many lessons to draw for the youth on this call. Usman, I want to bring you in on this two-part question. What have you taken from the sport of basketball? What have you given to the sport of basketball? The people, and it's basketball we're talking about, but people are in organized sports. People are in Little League baseball, soccer. Mahershala raised some interesting observations about how you start loving the sport, but when it gets to be so competitive, the parts that you love about it may not be there, and then there may be frustration about it as well. And then the second part of that is, what do we take from our sports heroes? We all have sports heroes. People on this call, pick your athlete: Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. What do we take? What should we take from our sports heroes?
So the first part of the question, gosh, it's gonna be so hard to answer in such a short amount of time, because the game has given me so much. I'll start if I reflect back into middle and high school, and I'm sure the many Khudam that are watching that are in that age group or have gone through that age group, they know. I'll take it to the philosophy of teaching of Islam, 3 moral states. That first moral state, the self that incites to evil. Well, that's where I was, and that's where I'm sure we've all been, middle and high school. And Shaitan is sharp, girls, and this, growing up in America, you know how it is. And then put that on top of it, being skilled in basketball and being considered a jock, however you want to call it, brings a whole plethora of temptations. But to be honest with you, basketball was my outlet, and it saved me. I could say it saved me, but it could have also been the prayers of my parents, or the prayers of my grandparents, or the prayers of the first one that accepted Promise Messiah's teachings. I don't know, but I do know that I held on to basketball. I was a shy middle schooler, shy high schooler. I wasn't comfortable talking to girls just because it was, it just wasn't. I was all brothers growing up, and sports was my thing. So that was my outlet. But then when I did start getting self-confidence with the sport, a lot of my peers started dating and all that. Those avenues were there, but I just stuck to the game. And so I felt like the game saved me in a lot of ways growing up. So that's one thing. I felt like it guided me and saved me in some ways. And then as I got older and started coaching and looking at the game from a different lens, you start to realize that, again, and you read the books of the Promised Messiah and the self that incites to evil, you start realizing that, gosh, I was there. And here I am coaching, JV and varsity high school, and I know exactly what they're going through. Yet they don't have that encompass of Islam, Ahmadiyyat around them. You start appreciating how much you had and how much you just took it for granted for so much. So to see the sport from that lens, but also see it from the basketball lens, where when you were young, I'm sure we all did this, 3rd, 4th grade, first league we played in, even through high school, I was doing it. After you played, first thing, you didn't care if you won or lost. You didn't care if you sacrificed for the team. What do we want to know? How many points did you score, right? You ran over, looked at it. And that's the self that incites to evil at the end of the day. If you look at it, we were all selfish. We wanted to score points. I remember I was a junior in high school, divisional playoff game. The gym was packed. I don't know if you know Lonnie Baxter, played in the NBA. We're playing against his team in high school. I mean, packed crowd. I was the 7th, 8th man of the team that year, my junior year. So sometimes I'd get in the first half, sometimes I wouldn't. I just remember looking around, girls hooting and hollering. It was just, I was like, if coach subs me in, I'm shooting the ball. I didn't care what the score was. This was me because I don't care, team, whatever. Yeah, I'm going to play hard. My coach was strict. Bob Knight style, made us play unbelievably hard on defense. But all I cared about was he calls my number. I'm shooting the ball when I'm in there because I know I'm only going to be there for maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And lo and behold, I got the ball, shot a sky hook over Lonnie Baxter. I was probably the only hook shot I ever shot. I was a 2-3. And it went in, and I remember that feeling. It was just addictive, that the rush, the adrenaline, scoring, the crowd going nuts. And what I'm trying to get at is and we're seeing it from a coach's perspective, we're selfish. We're prone to that selfish desires. But the more skills you get and the more it's all about winning, that's when those sacrifices start coming to play. And when you look at the NBA and the most successful teams, one of my favorite teams are the Spurs and the Golden State Warriors. They epitomize selflessness. And Tim Duncan, who got put in the Hall of Fame yesterday, like, what an absolute great leader. He is about as selfless as it gets. Could not care less about stats. just absolutely cared about his teammates, and that whole organization, the way they're run is, and you look at spirituality, it's all about giving yourself up. If you don't smash your ego in Islam, you're not going to get to God. You have to kill your ego to move up spiritually. So when you start looking at the game that way, as you grow old, and I'm on SAR now, and the more you read the Promised Messiah's writings, the more you start making these connections from sports, the passion that you have in basketball, at least for me, and the spiritual game. They're one and the same, and they'll help you absolutely. And I don't know if we're going to get to this, but I'll throw this in and I'll stop. But I come to appreciate the skill development. The game, where the game is now, it's the Steph Curry generation, we can call it. It's unbelievable. The skills that these players have is unreal. But I'm 42 years old and I get excited. I'll see stuff that they're doing and I'll go to the court. I honestly feel like I'm better now at 42 than I was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, just because I just want to grow. I want to get better every single day. But that's our job as Ahmadi Muslims as well. What is Hazur? Hazur is the greatest, I call him a spiritual instructor. We all pay money to get physical instructors, right? We want them to push us. Hazur pushes us spiritually. And you know what? I want to get better every day as a basketball player, but when I want to get better spiritually, I'm tapping into MTA. I'm tapping into Friday sermons, and they both do the same thing. I think at the end of the day, that should answer your question on the debate about what do we get from these heroes? Get better every day. Kobe was all about it. He didn't take shortcuts either. I thought Vanessa said that in the Hall of Fame speech. He took no shortcuts. And spiritually, we should take no shortcuts either. It's much harder. It's much harder when we talk about the spiritual game, but you'll get there. Patience is where it's at.
Usman, I think you make a profound and incredible point regarding the ego. So just to talk a little bit about my experience in basketball, I grew up, of course, watching Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson emerged in '96 in Georgetown, Ray Allen in the Big East, and, watching those guys play. I was under the impression that I always had to be the man, and I just wasn't, right? But I never had the experience or the guide or the coach to just sit me down and just say, look, you're a sixth or seventh man, right? That's your role. And honestly, thinking back on it, on my pride and ego, I think I would have quit the team if a coach would have sat me down and said that to me, right? Because I wanted to be on the top 5. So if I could, go back and rewind and do it all again, or give advice to any, khadam or, any young woman who's watching this, this episode, is you don't have to be the person, right? You don't have to put up 20, 30, 40 points a game to, to make things happen. You can be an X factor, right? If you kind of rewind and look back at how Kobe won his championships, Hakeem Olajuwon, LeBron James, there's always an X factor there, right? There's always that quiet person who just plays, who gets you 10 points, 5 rebounds, 8 or 9 assists, and, come up and hit the big shots, right? Robert Horry, I think he's won 6 championships. Nobody talks about him as, one of the greatest. He's won just as many as MJ did. Nevertheless, he was the guy. He was that X factor. Lamar Odom was that X factor. To me, those are really the most important guys on the team, right? Because they kind of bring everybody together. And that's the one thing I've learned in Ahmadiyya, especially, holding an office or, being a guide or serving in any sort of capacity. We don't want that role, right? We just want to be another guy, right? And kind of when we're going through the elections, we're like, man, I hope it's not me, but then if it is, you got to step up. Nevertheless, that's my
May I say something, brother?
Absolutely.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to apologize. My Wi-Fi just decided to cut out. So
you're good. You're good.
Some adjusting. But I wanted to say, it just in dovetailing on what Brother Abdul was saying, to me was really interesting. To be Robert Horry, to be Draymond Green. I mean, like key dudes, Vinnie Johnson, Dennis Rodman. To be these guys that are actually the difference between you winning a championship or not. I'm so glad you mentioned Lamar Odom. I know there's a lot of Lakers fans within the community. They wouldn't have won those championships without Lamar Odom, though. And so here's the thing though, for anybody to get to, I played mid-level D1 college basketball. Michael Jordan was it for me, especially I'm 47 years old. So you got to know like how much I saw of Michael Jackson too, but Michael Jordan, and just in what Jordan meant in terms of for everybody to dream beyond what they were doing. Like everybody wanted to jump from the free throw line, right? And even if it was like a trampoline, you know, and literally we jumped off of shopping carts and would jump and dunk. And eventually I was dunking though, like doing crazy stuff. But my point was, it was in trying to emulate the best to ever do it, got me to be at that moment the best that I could be, even if that meant falling into a role player role, right? So I don't necessarily think I'm not saying you're guiding anyone the wrong way. I don't necessarily think the goal is like, you see Draymond, you should try to be Draymond. Try to be better than Draymond, but if you end up at Draymond, that's a great place to be. And the last thing I want to say is what to me is brilliant. There was no Dennis Rodman before Dennis Rodman, right? And Larry Bird. There was no Larry Bird before Larry Bird per se. Larry Bird can't jump over a piece of paper, but was one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And so what I love is that you take people, Steph Curry, who did one thing good, and some coach might have said, hey, Steph, which they did, you can't come to my school. You're not good enough. You're not big enough. You're not whatever. And Steph ends up at Davidson and is like an All-American, right? Nobody's thinking about Davidson, right? And so for you to do that thing that you do really well, you may discover it and just committing to your skill set, which can in turn make you very special. And just committing, you could be the best sixth man in the league. And the difference between people winning championships, if you at some point commit to being your best, which places you in the position where, oh, we need a sixth man like that. Like everybody don't need Michael Jordan because they might already have Westbrook and Harden and whoever, you know. So my point is, it still goes back. Even if you end up being a role player, you have to be your best to be the best role player you can be, which might require you to dream beyond being a role player, right? And so there's always that. Also, you're like, there's that ego. There's that acceptance of you saying like, I did my best. This is where Allah has placed me in doing my best. I accept this, but I'll keep working to be my best. Maybe my role will grow. You be like Dennis Rodman, you shoot up 6 inches in the summer, and the next thing you know, you have a whole different set of opportunities. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. And if I can share super quick, last thing I want to say is when I was being recruited, and I may have shared this story in some context within the Ahmadiyya community, but when I was being recruited, I was living with my grandparents at that time. And I was probably at this time 17, and things kind of changed for me quick because I played really well at this one kind of like camp. It was called All-Star. It was called Superstars. It was in Santa Barbara. And coming out of that camp, it just changed. I've suddenly had a bunch of like WCC schools and like nice mid-level D1s, even like Penn State and these weird schools. And so there you get X amount of campus visits that you get to go to, 5, at least at that time. That may have changed. But anybody could come visit your home. You could have 200 schools come to your home. So a couple of my schools, one of the schools was Santa Clara University. And Santa Clara's coach at that time, his name was Dick Davey. And my high school coach was a little mini Dick Davey. And Dick Davey was a little mini version of Bobby Knight, like those crazy, like nuts coaches. And my high school coach idolized these guys. So he really wanted me to go play for Dick Davey at Santa Clara, which was in the Bay Area. It's a D1 school, good school, all that. Dick Davey comes into my house, into my grandparents' house, and it's me and my grandfather there. He's handling my recruiting visits. And Dick Davey says, so listen, you know, you're 6'2", you've been in high school, and 6'2", that's a center in high school, you know, for a lot of schools, because schools just are not packed with kids 6'5", 6'8". But I was playing like the 4, but really in off season, I was really a guard, you know? So he goes, you know, Dick Davey, Santa Clara's coach, goes, you know, you handle the ball okay, you know, you're good, you know, really good defender, good athleticism, you shoot okay, you know, but we'll take you, we'll work with you, you know, we can make you better. A week later, St. Mary's College coach comes into my house, along with these other coaches that had come in. But I mean, he's like, Allah's my witness, you're going to have to average 22 your freshman year for us to be successful. Coach tells you, you're going to have to average 22 points a game for us to be successful. You like, green light, I'm going there. So I passed up that scholarship at Santa Clara, right? Because I didn't like how they talked to me. Meaning, you know, I like what the other guy was saying. Not the guy who's telling me all the stuff I need to work on. I passed up that scholarship at Santa Clara. There was this kid out of Canada who had one scholarship offer, who was a soccer player, had one scholarship offer in all of the United States. And that was Steve Nash. And that kid who had one scholarship offer went to the school that I passed on. He wouldn't have gone there if I had taken it, because they wouldn't have had a scholarship for him. That kid, who was solid, was like athletically comparable to the Hornacek or somebody, like nobody special, was running my behind off of screens for 4 years, set me up for picks on his way to being a lottery pick. And Steve Nash went on to become a whatever, 2-time MVP, all-star, whatever, you know, but technically that was my scholarship first, in a sense, you know what I'm saying? And that right there was one of my biggest lessons coming out of school, was to see the success he had that I said no to a degree, from shying away from constructive criticism, which is why you go there. You don't go there for somebody to tell you you're great. You go there to become great. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, sort of, right? Right? You go there for a whole bunch of reasons, but you go there to like, this is who I can be my best with. And that's usually not the person telling you you're amazing. It's usually somebody who has something to say about how you can improve respectfully, you know? So I just want to add that. Thank you.
Well, that's a really great story. Silver lining, Nash has as many championships as you do, Mahershala, so you're good. I had to take a Nash stab there, but you know, I was thinking about what you're saying, Mahershala and Abdul. I want to pick up on something you said too, and bring in Uncle Shakoor and Usman on this, because you're talking about, you know, in a way, it's the unwilling leader. There's a humility to leadership that is ingrained in our ethos as Ahmadi Muslims, right? We don't nominate ourselves for office. We don't campaign. We don't seek office. It's a trust that's given to us many times unwillingly. And you see so many of what I would say our spiritual heroes in the Jamaat, but of course, beginning with Khalifatul Masih, is the intense humility when they're put in a position of leadership. Hazur talks about this when he was elected as Khalifa, the burden that he felt, the fear of that position and being resigned in Allah's will. And that to this day, that humility is on display every time we see him, every Friday when he delivers a sermon. But see, that transcends into sports, right? Because the idea of ambition is not really something, this idea of success and ego and ambition is not something that is consistent with our values. But what is consistent is effort, hard work, and what the Quran says, fastabaqul khairat, compete with one another in goodness. The competition, the Quran says everyone has a goal which dominates you. So vie then with one another in goodness. Competition is mentioned in the Quran. It is Islamic. but the idea of competing for what and for what sake and what are you building, the higher purpose, that competition may be inconsistent with this idea of your own ego and your own point total and keeping track of where you're excelling, the number of championships and all the debates about who's better, LeBron and Michael. At the end of the day is, who are you as a person and as a character? And on that, I want to bring in folks on this question, which is, you know, at the end of the day, you Hail Mary, the word Hail Mary is used in football, or he threw up a prayer. You know, these are phrases that we say casually, but they have meaning, right? The idea here, in my estimation, and what I would like to hear and reflect on is, what are we making with this idea of you're playing the game of basketball, you're succeeding at a high level, but are you really focusing in a manner that's consistent with the broader values? When Chris Jackson, who later became Mahmood Abdul Rauf, he was Kaepernick before Kaepernick, okay? He could hit a three-pointer like we all knew growing up watching him. I know Mahershala Ali probably remembers Chris Jackson. I mean, he was three-point competition, forget about it, right? He took a stand. When he decided not to participate, when he was making prayers during the anthem, he was objecting to what he viewed was oppression. By the way, the same oppression which we see right now. And he was never able to come back into the NBA. He had a little stint with the Grizzlies, and he never was able to do it. But he felt socially aware as a Muslim. He converted at the time. Hakeem Olajuwon was there. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was there. There were Muslims we looked up to. But Chris Jackson, most people don't even know him. I mean, I know him because I grew up in the 90s. A lot of people don't know Mahmood Abdul Rauf. But if people who do know socially conscious causes and Kaepernick know Chris Jackson and know Mahmood Abdul Rauf, what he stood for. So I wanted to ask about this idea of social consciousness in the sport and the values you bring to the sport. And some people say, I mean, we've heard, I mean, that's controversial about it, right? Laura Ingraham tells LeBron James, shut up and dribble the ball, right? That's an extreme view. You have a job, you're in entertainment, it's a business side, you do your sport. But is that correct? And as a Muslims who are athletes, each of you in your own right, what do you say about this issue of social consciousness and how do you bring that to bear in basketball? Maybe Uncle Shakoor, you can talk about that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is our creed. We are striving to fulfill the 10 conditions of bay'at. We know in the world, the Muslim world, the most injustice that is occurring is the people, the Muslims who call themselves Muslims, who will not accept the coming of the Messiah and the Mahdi. It is the reason why we see the things that we're seeing now called injustices. When you fail to be obedient and submissive to Allah, you see what we see. We get what we get. We have a Khalifa who has called on the world to accept peace. It's his duty. It's what he was chosen by Allah to do. When we practice, we are seeking to please Allah because he chose us to find this faith. In my journey, as I said, I was a Christian. When I came out of college, I went to a yoga institute to study comparative religion, to find out what yoga was about. And it placed me on a journey that I ended up at the mosque in Dayton, Ohio, Fazli Umar Mosque, and find myself during the month of Ramadan in 1979 hearing the missionary give commentary to Al-Fatiha. And I was like, wow, this here is what I've been searching for. But Allah chose to send me there. And I am grateful then I'm striving to be a grateful servant to Allah. And when we hear what's going on in the world, the solution is Ahmadiyya. Because the promised Messiah, والسلام, was chosen to fulfill the prophecies of the Quran and the Holy Prophets, ﷺ. And he has not been accepted by the world, except those of us who are striving the 10 conditions of Bayat. So when we listen to what's being said about these sports young people, the greatest sport is to seek to win the pleasure of Allah. And you have to practice every day, all day, to strive to become righteous. That's what this is all about. Now, we can hear all of the stories about who we know, who we looked up to. The greatest basketball player, Bill Russell. If you want to find out about Bill Russell, read his book, because he has the most championships of any basketball player. The MVP trophy is named after Bill Russell, but we know little about him. So when we're seeking to be an athlete, whatever sport we choose, we want to play, we want to have fun, but to be a part of the team and to seek to perfect the skill, that's what Islam is. Seeking to perfect the skill of La ilaha illallah and submit to the leadership of Caliphate. That's where we're at. So when I listen to what's been said today, I'm grateful to Allah to have been able to be a part of this. And inshallah, we'll see what happens tomorrow as we strive to become a better Muslim Ahmadi. Jazakumullah for including me in this today. I really appreciate it.
Really well said, Uncle Shakoor. Thank you so much for that. Usman, your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think, to me, one thing that jumps out is courage to stand up to truth, or to stand up to what may be, I think people fear saying the truth these days in media, right? Kyrie came out yesterday, was willing to put his brand on the line and to talk about the oppressions in Palestine. And when it comes to courage, it's, I think, steps to exercise. The second Khalifa has said, one of my favorite quotes in that book was, he wants Khodam to play sports to build courage. And so to me, it comes back to courage. And one thing with courage, if you read the Quran, there's a story of Moses and his disciples, Hazrat Moses, where his disciples lacked courage, where they looked over in Palestine and they said, go ahead, Moses, you fight, we'll stand right here. And then you see the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his disciples, and we are a descendant of that. And what did they say right before the Battle of Badr? There was 1,000+ Meccans coming. There's only 313 Muslims. And they said, oh, Muhammad ﷺ, we will not be like the disciples of Moses who left Moses. We will stand to the right of you, the left of you, in front of you, behind you. We're ready to sacrifice everything and anything to support you. And I'm sorry, we're a cut of that. And as a Muslim, if you see wrong, you speak up and you put your tawakkul and your trust in God, that he'll take care of the rest. So if there's wrong out there, I salute Kyrie and I salute anyone else that's willing to put their trust in God and speak whatever's wrong. As a Muslim, we have a right to stand up and speak and say that that's wrong. That's my piece on it.
Well, we're getting here on the hour, and we just had we want to take a few questions before we close while we have our esteemed panelists. Man, this is an amazing conversation. There's so much, it's so rich. I hope we can continue it. Abdul, hi, okay if I field a few questions? They came in the chat. We are on YouTube Live, so people can submit their questions. Here's one that came in, very interesting question. This is from Mansoor Mirza, very interesting question. Kobe's mindset of perfecting his craft and sacrificing everything is often praised. But if we apply those same principles to faith, sometimes an individual like that can be considered extreme or an extremist. what is your view about that idea of, I guess what he's trying to drive at is that singular focus for greatness and ambition maybe seem as maybe disproportionate or not balanced. Mahershala, you want to chime in on that mentality?
Assalamu alaikum. Well, I think it's a matter of perspective. I think there's no Muslims in my family. So I imagine Ramadan seems extreme to my family, right? But then there's levels of, within Islam, people go to levels that for you feel so distant, you're like, whoa. Or even sex, right? Like how certain sects might handle something may feel extreme in comparison to how you may approach something, or how a different sect may discipline something in a different region, right? So I do feel like some of that is a matter of perspective. I feel like Kobe felt extreme to some of his players. That's what some of those stories are about. Kobe, Jordan, the ones that achieve a certain degree of success, our missionaries, imams, you know, that to your lay Muslim, if there is such a thing, you know what I mean? That degree of commitment and knowledge, and going to Jamia for 7 years. And then within the missionary community, there's, forgive me, but I'm sure there's a certain hierarchy within the missionaries who feel like, but that brother over here, because they're humble too, right? And can recognize qualities in each other, and like probably within there look up to each other. And then the top is Hazur, right? And so I feel like I do get the spirit of the question for sure. I'm not trying to avoid the spirit of the question, which is like, I think worldly success with extreme commitment, that may cause all kind of sacrifices. Kids grow up, they're 30 years old, and they're like, my dad was never around because he was leading marches all the time for civil rights. Like those things happen all the time, those examples. So something as extreme as a very successful athlete, that a lot of relationships and time and development and stuff like that gets sacrificed. But I think what I am trying to express though is it makes sense to me that a certain degree of secular success eventually people can get behind and support. And religious success, spiritual success is not really of us to judge, right? That's kind of like, that is Allah's perspective, to be like, that person is successful spiritually. But some of the commitments can appear to the lay eye, can appear extreme, right? But it makes sense to me that people are not necessarily like praising a former superstar, whatever, for like what's the musician Yusuf Islam. Like people are not, he's not selling platinum records right now, you know, because he's older too. But my point is, I see why people aren't always celebrated for a spiritual success, because that takes a different type of eyes to be able to recognize it and sort of praise it, you know. And it also, I think it's seen with a certain degree of loss, right? If you are really committed, then you're losing a worldliness, you know. And so I just think this, the worldly success is a lot easier to coalesce behind, like, or to sort of like galvanize and everyone look to and uphold, you know. But I think you did speak to, and quoting the Quran about, you know, people's lives having a calling, basically, like, right? Like everyone having this deeper calling. And in certain ways, depending on where you are, you can look at someone else's calling and be very critical of it, right? But we also don't know what their calling has done as far as like them and their own spiritual development and the people that they may have impacted, right? And so I think it's about you taking the information that you know to be true, and with the community that you come from, and what Allah, the knowledge that Allah has blessed you with, and trying to expand that knowledge as best you can, and valuing yourself and your truth, right? And so for us, you know, that's Ahmadiyyat. And so within that, there's ranks, and there's spiritual ranks, right? But then like ranks of like, I got to push myself to get to this other place, looking at Hazur, you know, as my current physical example, you know, and that being a reminder to look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you know, Promised Messiah, alayhi salam, right? You know, and so I think I'm basically just saying it's a matter of perspective. And I think we all have to just be conscious of that and go back to like, well, what is it that you value? You know, like we know better, like, yeah, of course. So like, as far as like what we should prioritize, right? You know, and so how do we improve ourselves in our religion, you know? So.
Very well put, very interesting. Falah Sadiq asks, can the panelists share some faith-inspiring stories where their prayers may have helped change an outcome of a basketball game? Anyone wants to take a shot? The hoopers here on. That's for anyone. Walaikum salam. Uncle Shakoor, go ahead.
The value of prayer is everything we do. So if we pray before each game, we're asking God to help us to win and we be victorious in the process. So that whole thing, you always pray. It wasn't any, I mean, the night I scored my 1,000th point in college, it wasn't until the end of the game, 3 free throws to win the game. And the other team's coach said that he figured if he triple teamed me that night, they had a chance to win. And they did have a chance to win. But because of praying that Allah give us an outcome of victory, it wasn't until the end of the game that I was able to score to win the game. And I attributed that all to the prayer. In high school, before every game, the starters, the 5 starters, would lay on the floor and pray the Lord's Prayer. So always, before I became Muslim, it was God first. So when we understand that and we take that and we apply it to our lives, success is what we'll have.
Well put, Uncle Shakoor. Very nicely put. Abdul, Usman, yeah.
2008, there was a centenary, 100-year Khilafat centenary games that were being celebrated in London. So they hosted a few tournaments. One was a basketball tournament, and I was blessed to be part of the U.S. team. We were being coached by Maulana Azhar Hanif Saab and Jamil Gori, who's out of Racine, Wisconsin. I remember he had a mulaqat prior to the championship game. It was a day before, and we were going to meet Canada in the championship game. And Brother Jamil Gori asked Hazur, last thing, can you please, Hazur, can you pray that USA wins tomorrow? And Hazur said, no, I can't pray for that. So lo and behold, that was just a prayer that he asked, but that shows the love of Hazur, that we're all his chosen brothers, and he wasn't going to pray against any one of us. So the prayer was asked, alhamdulillah, it was still answered through Allah Ta'ala. We were able to win.
Great story. Abdul Hai?
Assalamu alaikum. Just 2 quick stories. I was coaching for a local high school here in Jacksonville, and I don't think it was one prayer, that made this happen, but I think it was just a constant pursuit of prayers that helped me just to trust that Allah is the disposer of the affairs and, the best of planners. And, I always coached the 9th and the 10th grade young men. And, they had big egos. They thought they were better than what they actually were. Everybody wanted to be the man. And there was a game that I marked on the calendar, which was against Ribault High School. And they're historically a very good basketball squad here in Jacksonville. And throughout the game, 4 quarters, we were down, in between 7 and 15 points the entire game. And the last 3, and, every timeout, every dead ball, players would come to me. I said, gentlemen, just trust the process, trust what we've been doing. I said, here in a couple minutes, they're going to make 1 or 2 mistakes. We're better conditioned than they are. We're going to capitalize, and they're going to lose their morale. And alhamdulillah, it happened. And so the JV game was about to end. So everybody was starting to trickle in for the varsity game. So it was one of those rare occasions where the whole gym was packed. And they saw us, cut the lead from 15 to 7. to 6 to 5, you know, and then we ended up taking over the lead with about 30 seconds left. And the whole gym was going bananas. And it was just one of those times where after the game, it was that full, you know, unconditional trust that they had in me, you know, and that was something that I pray for my players. I always pray for my players and my students that, you know, that they can just trust me and understand what we're trying to do and kill their ego. And it was one of those moments. And it was the best victory I've ever had coaching high school here in Jacksonville, Florida. I can still feel the emotion when I'm talking about it. And then the other one was in 2019 when Brother Usman invited me down to Belize to be a part of the ABL or the camps. And, you know, the whole way, alhamdulillah, I was able to offer Darood and, you know, just, you know, constantly be in the remembrance of Allah. And I got off the plane, alhamdulillah, the security guards, you know, saw my shirt and they said, "Oh, you're an Ahmadi, just go ahead," right? I had never stepped foot in Belize before. They just saw my shirt and they just said, "Hey, don't need to check your bags, just go do your thing." And got into you know, met them at the park. And they had already had the players, you know, started to be sorted out a little bit. So I got my team handed to me. And from the beginning, one of the beautiful things about the Ahmadiyya basketball camps is you have to take a whole season and condense it in maybe 2 hours. You have to get them to trust you, to introduce yourself, to buy in, to believe in what you're saying. And I was able to do this in 2 hours with this particular group of gentlemen. And, you know, we won that championship, that first league. And it was just a beautiful thing just to work with a bunch of young men that I had never met before, different language, different culture, but just to sell them or to convey to them the principles of Ahmadiyyat and for them to buy into it and for us to be successful within just a few hours was an incredible experience. And again, that was all because of prayers and just following the teachings of you know, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Mahdi Messiah.
MashaAllah. Wow. What very inspiring stories. Mahershala, I want you to chime in on that question about prayers, but also there's a question came in from Ansar Daud, which maybe you can comment on about the approach to speak up for injustice when you're in a position of some kind of a pedestal or a perch. And that's not just sport, but also, you know, in your own personal life. And when sometimes you're in the limelight, how do you navigate those waters too?
Okay. The first question is, I personally, this is everyone's own perspective. I just personally never felt comfortable praying for wins. You know, I just always felt like I wanted to pray for myself and for us to do our best that day. And inshallah, and again, this is before I was Muslim, but that our best would be better than their best that day. Like the combination of whatever things. But I mean, that's basically you're praying to win, but I felt more comfortable praying like, it's sort of like praying for the truth, right? Like I would love the truth to be that my absolute best, I put everything together today and collectively will put us in a place where we're able to walk out with that victory. So it was really more about like, you know, praying to be able to sleep well at night, because you can't go beyond, you know, playing your absolute best. So that's what I would pray for. That's what I would pray for. In terms of celebrities or, you know, athletes and celebrities speaking up about issues, we're whole people. So, you know, just in being whole individuals, you can't necessarily confine somebody to staying in the place of how you see them, meaning like you're a fan or you appreciate their work or how well they play something. So, and that's comfortable for me and how I see you. So just stay within those parameters and don't speak to these other things in life that you are also emotionally impacted on, you know? Now, there's so many things though, right? Like, so then it becomes about balance and you beginning to, depending on what your position is, right? And your platform and how you speak publicly, like it takes a lot of thought to me. So personally, I'm not like, with things that I personally post, I try to be very conscious about it because I'm not necessarily a reactive poster, or I'm not someone who in my life is seeking a microphone all the time, right? And so, but I feel like, you definitely have a responsibility to participate and speak up and speak out, and to do that to some degree, and do it very consciously and carefully, but to definitely have the courage to do so, and to do it within parameters of one's own comfort level. But to, by any means or any stretch, to expect people to like shut themselves off from the litany of issues that are going on in the world, from what is happening in Palestine to civil rights and social injustice issues here, to voting rights issues being taken away, to Asian hate crimes, to white supremacy issues, the things going around the world. There's so much to speak to, and depending on where we are in a given month or week, from COVID to so many, depending on what we're doing in a particular time, I think it's about galvanizing the information. That's personally what I'm currently doing, getting information and figuring out how to properly speak to things in a way that really reflects how you feel. Because also, and the reason I feel like it takes so much thought is because we live in a time where things are truncated. So whatever your truncated version of a larger situation is, you put that out and your response to it is truncated and shrunk and then ran with. So it just takes a certain degree of consciousness to make sure, and me personally, Amjad, you know me pretty well. Me personally, I really make an effort to make sure that what I say is what I'm thinking, so to speak, or reflects the context and consciousness and the degree of thought I put into things, right? So all that stuff takes a little bit of time, and especially depending on someone's rhythm or presence in the culture. There's people like D.L. Hewley, who post in some shape or form. I don't have a Twitter or Facebook, whatever, but who post in some way, shape, or form every couple of days about stuff politically all around the world and all kinds of situations, right? But then there's somebody who may do certain things like every blue moon and might advertise a project they're in or not, and might speak to George Floyd's death, but might not necessarily speak on the sentencing of the police officer or whatever. So all I'm just trying to say is that athletes, actors, people all have a right and definitely some responsibility to speak to things. And especially you add, for me, the added layer of being a Muslim, it adds on definitely a responsibility. It's a little bit challenging because often I feel a little bit alone. So there's these moments where, yeah, he's Muslim, but then half the time you're like, he's not Muslim. So for me, it's like a little bit complicated when you're out there, because there's times in which you are elevated and there's times in which you're diminished, from not being the right type of Muslim, and so all of these issues make it, for me, it gives, for someone who already tries to be very thoughtful, when I interject in some sort of larger conversation, right? It makes it a little bit more complicated being Ahmadi at times, because it's kind of like, not that it's like, oh, you're welcome and you're not welcome. It's just, that's in a ways in which you can imagine that can be very complicated, in weaving in and out of certain environments. But absolutely, it's something that has always happened. If you look at Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali, yeah, and Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, they were standing right there with Dick Gregory and Martin Luther King, and you name it, Malcolm X, and so on and so forth. Like, so that is a key element of bringing attention and awareness to things, and certain ingredients participating and giving support in certain ways at times.
Really, really deep observations, Mahershala. I mean, the tightrope there, it is a minefield, and to be in a position where you have to, you have a conscience, you want to speak, but you also have to deal with such extraneous factors, and especially in a heightened social media environment, that's a really tricky arena. But the takeaway that you're saying, and so many of the panelists here today have said, and to all the youth as well, is your convictions are your convictions. You're a whole person, as Mahershala said. So your convictions will be reflected. How you reflect them is your choice, but they will be reflected. They could be even reflected in your quiet prayers in the dead of night when no one's around. But Allah is watching those prayers. Allah is listening to those prayers. So your convictions can be reflected externally. They can be on social media. That doesn't mean people who aren't vocal necessarily on social media don't have those convictions or feelings with equal power and fervor. It's just that we're kind of trapped in this ecosystem where we try to think through the prism of an Instagram post or a tweet, you know, and that's not always conducive to recognizing that social awareness. We have a few minutes left. We're really at the end, actually, and I wanted to ask this question, which really is something on the minds of a lot of Atfal and kids. And Faik Malik, who's I think a guide here in Los Angeles, asked this question for any of you to answer. Some kids love playing basketball or any sport for that matter, to the point where they spend hours playing in leagues, AAU, you know, junior basketball, et cetera, NJB. And some of their parents may see it as a waste of time. And they say, oh, well, you should be focused on spiritual matters or maybe doing Jamaat work. What is the message to children who really are wanting to practice at that level and this balance? Anyone want to take a shot at that?
Make your 5 daily prayers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to put Allah first.
Alhamdulillah. And there's that answer is, it may seem simple, but there's so much depth to that, right? Because the 5 daily prayers regulates your day. So in a way, the balance comes from putting prayers first, right? Which is in fact, that's how the Quran describes the 5 timings of the prayers, is that regulation of your body, which, as we started in the beginning, is body and soul. Mahershala, you wanted to chime in on that?
I would just say that I think, Assalamu alaikum, I just think as parents, you can encourage your kids to somehow, and in the youth or whatever, anybody, you can challenge yourself to say, how can I practice my religion in the sport? And what I mean by that is, how can I play with love? How can I share? How can I stand up in the moment? How can I do the tough thing? How can I, be a good teammate? How can I, I feel like all those things are inherently in some ways applicable in one's religion. That's all. And in how you play. I think that there is something that, if you think about, I think if you perhaps watch Elijah Wan or Kareem or something you have to assume that there's something in the integrity and the character and the attributes that are highlighted within Islam, Muhammad Ali and how he fought. You'd have to believe that those things ended up impacting how they played what they played, because they can't separate themselves from the religion. So, you don't necessarily see Kyrie or Kareem. He fought back, but he wasn't necessarily running up in the stands and punching them in the face because somebody said something crazy to him, just and how he carried himself. I feel like it came out in the sport, and look he's arguably the most consistent player, of all time, has been had sustained such an extraordinary career. But I was just saying, just encourage those to find ways in which you can practice the attributes of your religion within your sport and all things that you do.
Very nice. Usman, you have your final thoughts on that question?
Sure. I think beloved Hazur had mentioned in a Zoom meeting a couple of months ago to a tifl, and the advice he gave was make sports your entertainment. Because nowadays, people want to play, they're stuck on Instagram or all these Fortnite, you name it. There's so much digital type of entertainment. And his advice, and I think all our beloved Hazurs have always pushed sports. But I think if you simplify your life, especially this day and age with all the temptations out there, all the stuff on, Netflix can ground you. But if sports is your entertainment, like beloved Hazur was saying, is like you were saying, Amjad, it's going to build your body, and your body's connected to your soul. So we got to put some type of effort into your body to become a wholesome, the best possible spiritual believer you can be. So you can't neglect sports or physical fitness. It's going to be a part of your life. It's just about balance. And I think following the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's teachings and ways, and that's the greatest balance you can get, is follow him and follow the Sahaba. And that's all I got on that.
MashaAllah, wonderful. Abdul, you have the final word and the final question too. So take it away.
Right. I would say my advice is just to understand you are what you repeatedly do, right? This was kind of a moniker or saying we always told our players, right? If you're not consistent in the classroom, what makes you think that you're going to be consistent on the court? So these things are mutually defined, not mutually exclusive. So the type of guy that I see offering salat 5 times a day, right? It doesn't matter what level skill he's at. That's the dude I want on my team, because I know that he's going to bring these intangibles that other people don't have to the court, right? So I'll pass on a guy who, only goes to salat twice a day and scores 30 versus a guy who will do salat 5 times a day and give me 10, right? Because there's just intangibles that are much more valuable than those points. Those are the X factors that Mahershala was talking about earlier. So before we end, I know it's on everybody's mind. I just got one real quick question. So just quick response. So the question is who is your favorite player of all time? Who is the best player now, right, in this current age? And then who's the greatest of all time? No explanation, just 3 names. No rationale, just 3 names. So
who's going to take that? Go ahead.
Growing up, my favorite player of all time was Magic, and then as I grew, became Jason Kidd, just because both of those were all about making those around them better. I love that style of play. What was the other one? Greatest currently and greatest of all time. Greatest currently stuff.
Best player now in this current. I
mean, if we're going 7-game series, you got to go LeBron still. But I think Durant's right there, 1A, 1B. And then all time, it's got to be Jordan. Yeah.
All right. Uncle Abdul Shakoor Ahmad, what you say?
My favorite player was Nate Tiny Archibald, because he was the guard that led the league in scoring and assists. The greatest of all time, I've already said, Bill Russell. And my favorite player now, another guard, Steph Curry.
All right. Brother Mahershala?
Jordan, Steph. Steph Curry, pound for pound, is the best player to play the game. I'm telling you, pound for pound. Because again, Steph is not a great athlete. He really isn't. What you see from Steph is from him doing from since he was 3 years old. So if Steph was 6'6", 240, again, that's not the conversation. But Jordan was my favorite coming up. I think Jordan is the best of all time. And also what Kobe and certain other people are able to do, they got that from Jordan in a certain way. And then also I think Curry right now is actually, to me, the best player in the league, because all around game, Westbrook is a beast too. But LeBron is amazing. I'll go with Curry from the Bay.
You say Jordan, Curry.
No, Jordan, Curry, LeBron. Meaning Jordan, my favorite growing up. Jordan, the best of all time. I think I roll with Curry right now in this moment. Okay. As far as the best right now.
Fair enough.
I know it's crazy to say, but that's my.
That's fine. I got a crazy one too. Amjad, what do you say?
Magic, my favorite growing up. Kobe, the best of all time, although I know Jordan probably technically is, but I got to give it to Kobe. But my favorite, and no surprise here for those on Sports Chat, is Brody. He's Westbrook. His intensity, man, the passion he brings to the game and what he's done 12 years and what he's still going to do. And also on and off the court, his demeanor, but I got to go with Westbrook.
Yeah, I would say my favorite player of all time, believe it or not, was John Starks. He always matched up against Michael Jordan in the playoffs growing up. There was just something about him I loved. Best player now is Westbrook. I think he's incredibly industrious to just put up triple-double game after game after game. It takes a special player to do something like that. And then the greatest of all time is Jordan to me.
MashaAllah.
I'm
Nice
sure
question.
we'll take the debate to different channels.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you started a lot of conversations right now. That's how you want to end with this, MashaAllah.
Can I throw another goat out there? Just because
Okay.
I feel like he gets overlooked every time Ahmadis talk about goats. But my goat when we talk about basketball and faith is Imam Azhar Hanif Sahib. I mean, to walk away from he was as skilled as they get, and for him to walk away from that and dedicate, and we talk about sacrifice to grow spiritually. Come on now. That's
MashaAllah. Very, very nice. And also, we hope to have him on future programming. What a story, Maulana Azhar Hanif Sahib and his basketball career and what he did with his life. Alhamdulillah, everyone. This was just wonderful. So thankful to these panelists. They're just amazing. Uncle Shakoor, thank you so much for coming. I know it was difficult to spare that time, and you came. Mahershala, always a pleasure. Just delighted to have you on. Usman, you bring so much energy. Abdul, Thomas, what an amazing panel. I want to say there were attendees from Canada, Toronto, London, Fazl Umar Basketball Club, and Ravwa, Pakistan was on this call. MashaAllah. All salam to all of you. Belize. We have so many people and voices. We hope to carry some of this programming in the future. Maybe talk a little bit about the documentary as well as we move forward. For now, Jazakallah for joining. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.